Thank you everyone for being here. Welcome to this webinar, which is a global webinar. We have audiences from the Americas, from Europe, Asia, everywhere. Thank you for being here. We're going to talk with Alex Bauer. He's Intive's AI solution architect with over 6 years of experience in data science and machine learning. And today, he's going to explore the transformative capabilities of ChatGPT, real-world examples of its implementation, and also the potential for the fintech industry with some use cases. Okay, you know that you are able to chat with us through the whole webinar, so you can ask questions, and also you can go to the questions and answers option here in Zoom, and you can also leave your questions there. We're gonna take questions along the webinar, and also we're going to allow for a space afterwards to respond to any further questions. Okay, so Alex, your turn.
Yeah, welcome to this webinar about the power of ChatGPT for FinTechs. And as Thelma just said, you can ask questions at any time. If it's becoming too many questions, we just move them to the end. But there's about 10 to 15 minutes reserved at the end for questions and answers. All right, so I have basically 3 agenda points that you can see here. The first one is, what is ChatGPT and how does it work? The second one is a live demo about a real-world case study. And the last agenda point is going to be FinTech use cases using ChatGPT. 6 of them, 6 different ones. And throughout this webinar, you will encounter a couple of different chat assistants. Like each of these use cases is implemented as a prototype chat assistant. And even the presentation itself is kind of supported by a chat assistant. So the first one that you're going to encounter is a presentation assistant. And you will see a tiny little bit of code just as you see here. I hope it's not too confusing. It should be almost self-explanatory. So what we just do here is import a piece of software that represents this assistant, which is a presentation assistant in this case, and we instantiate it in this line. So I'm going to do this now. And now we will have a presentation assistant available that helps me deliver this presentation. And the first thing we'll do is ask it what ChatGPT is. So I say, presentation assistant, send a message. So I send a message to it and ask, what is ChatGPT? And it's answering with, at its core, it's an artificial intelligence in the form of a large language model called GPT 3.5, later GPT 4, and it can understand and produce natural language similar to humans. All right, next thing we want to know is, how does it work? So we send that message and ask, how does it work? It is powered by artificial neural networks with about 1 trillion parameters. And just for comparison, there's about 100 trillion synapses in the human brain, and synapses and parameters are more or less equivalent, roughly speaking. And you have a little illustration here of an artificial neural network where all these little bubbles represent artificial neurons, and all the connections between them, these lines between them, represent these connections, the parameters or synapses. And the thickness of these connections corresponds to the strength of the connection. So that's a very rough analogy to the human brain, but of course, it's very much simplified. But if you count these connections here in this illustration, you will find that there's 108 connections, so 108 parameters. And just underneath, I have written down number of parameters that the ChatGPT model has, which is 1 trillion. So that will be 10 billion times the number of connections that you see here. And it already looks a bit confusing and complicated. So you can get an idea of how huge and complex it is. But still, it's 100 times less complex than the human brain. And of course, it's not only about connections and neurons. It's also really about the structure and what has been learned by this neural network, or also the human brain. So they're not really comparable, but still remotely. Okay, next thing we want to know is, why does it actually work so well? You've probably heard that ChatGPT is kind of surprisingly performant in some ways, and now we want to know, why is that the case? And the reason is that it is trained on a huge amount of data sourced from the internet, including whole Wikipedia and lots of crawled web data, as well as some open books. So it's literally billions of words that it has seen in its training time. And that training time took up to a year. So it was up to a year of constantly computer clusters running in the cloud training this model. And that costs a lot of money, more than 100 million for GPT-4, like the latest version of ChatGPT. And it's built by OpenAI, which is based in Silicon Valley, with a team of more than 120 world-class researchers and heavily backed by Microsoft, which invested more than $10 billion in it. And here's a little illustration of how these models are trained. So basically, all they do is they get some context, some textual context, like the beginning of a sentence here. The Trevi fountain is in the center of, and then what their task is just on what they are taught to do is to predict just the next word that should come now. And in this case, there would be Rome, in contrast to like all the other possible answers that you could give, like Buenos Aires. So Rome has a much higher probability of being the next word in this sentence. And these probabilities are kind of extracted through the learning process from this large text corpus, which is basically the internet, or actually a significant chunk of the internet. What the model learns is like these distributions of probabilities and these probabilistic relationships between words in context. So Trevi fountain is just occurs a lot in the context of Rome and vice versa, and these connections, these relationships are learned. That's all it is trained for. So the question remains, why are large language models such a big deal? So let's ask that. And that is because of the emergence of unforeseen new capabilities without explicit training or tuning for them. And that even surprised the research community. So as you increase the number of parameters in the model, meaning basically the size of the model, all these capabilities suddenly start to emerge. So the model is suddenly able to do arithmetics or code completion or translation even, to explain jokes, to do physics Q&A, all these kind of things that it has never been explicitly trained to do. All it has been trained to do is to predict the next word in a sentence. And that is quite surprising that all these capabilities suddenly almost magically arise the bigger you make these models. And what was especially surprising was that the research community actually thought that there must be a limit to this at some point. If you increase the model and the data set, at some point it's just not going to get better. But what they found so far is that the bigger they make it and the more data they put in, it just gets better and better and more sophisticated in its capabilities. All right. The last thing in this section that we want to know about background of ChatGPT is why is specifically ChatGPT so famous? Because it's not the only large language model that exists. But with GPT 3.5, OpenAI increased really the size of the model and the training data set by a factor of 10 compared to all the previous models that existed. But the research community has been working on this for years already. These models have been existing for years. But what made it really break through and trigger this kind of boom is that OpenAI made it available to the general public through ChatGPT or as ChatGPT through that browser-based chatbot interface that everybody can just go on the internet and chat with this really sophisticated language AI. And they also provide an API for developers, so it can be integrated in other softwares. And that's the same API that I used for building these prototypes of the 6 FinTech use cases that you will see later on. Okay, so that's all about the background of ChatGPT that I wanted to show. Now let's there's this one more graph, of course, which shows the time it took to reach 1 million users for a couple of different successful tech companies. And you see that most companies took a few months or even years to reach 1 million users, but ChatGPT took only 5 days to actually reach that amount of users. So you can really say that it is quite popular, it's quite famous, it was quite successful. Obviously, the question also is when the product was launched. It's not the same when you launched a product 25 years ago. To reach 1 million users was much harder than now. And also the question remains how many users will actually stay and come back. But at least it sparked a lot of interest in the beginning. Okay, so now let's come to the live demo of the real world case study that I've been involved in building. First, let's ask the presentation assistant what the challenge was that we faced here. And the problem that we were tasked with was that the Scottish government provides a vast range of public services for the Scottish citizens. But finding the right service in this huge landscape of various services is very hard if you want to find it online, and especially for disabled citizens, if they're visually impaired, for example, it's hard for them to navigate all these websites that are all very diverse and scattered all over the place. So that was the problem that we were challenged with, and how did we tackle this? The solution that we came up with was is a multimodal conversational search engine that helps citizens, especially those with disabilities, to find the right service efficiently. Multimodal because you can either text with it or you can talk with it. If you talk with it, it talks back to you. So visually impaired as well as hearing impaired people can use it as an assistant to help them find the right service for their needs. And I'm gonna demo that right now. So the scenario here is that I'm a Scottish citizen that is visually impaired, that needs to get their grocery shopping done, but they don't want to just get the stuff delivered. They actually want to go out and stay independent and have the experience of like doing the shopping myself. It's just important for me to stay independent and do it on my own. So I'm looking for some service to help me with that, with doing my grocery shopping. So this is mygov.scot, which is just a landing page from the Scottish government that already existed. That has nothing to do with our product so much. It's just like a typical landing page where many Scottish citizens would go to as a first entry point to look for some services. But what we added here is this accessibility button that you can click, and it opens this chatbot. Sorry, this chat assistant that is called Stuart, and he's introducing himself with, "Hi, I'm Stuart. I can help you find public services. You can talk or text with me. How may I help you?" And I'm just gonna say, "Wanna go shopping?" And then they ask me, "What type of shopping are you looking for?" I'll be brief and just say groceries. Then ask me, "Do you have any disabilities that I should be aware of?" And I'm saying visually impaired. Now it asks me, "What kind of assistance do you need for your grocery shopping?" And I'll say, "Getting to and through the store, and also finding products, because it's hard for me to know where they are, to read labels and things like that." "Which city are you locating in?" "Edinburgh." That's what I'm choosing. And now it's basically calculating, taking this conversation, extracting the information that I was giving it, and then comparing it to the services that it has in its database, and trying to find the best matches that would help me with my request. Now it answers, "Got it. I can help you find grocery stores in Edinburgh that offer assistance for visually impaired customers with getting to and through the store, as well as finding products. These 3 services could offer the greatest benefit to your needs. Click on one of them or tell me its name or number to get redirected to its homepage." And now here are the 3 services: Site Scotland, Nestrans Estel Assistance Card, and this one. And I can just click on them, and then I would be redirected to the page of that service. All right, that was the live demo of this product that we are currently developing. So this was the redirection. Now we're going back to the presentation. There's still some more things that I want to show about this case study, specifically how this search engine actually works. So I'll ask that to the presentation assistant, and it's telling me that a language model converts the service descriptions. For each service, we have a description, And a language model converts them to embeddings, so-called embeddings in high-dimensional semantic space, where proximity in that space represents similarity. And then the assistant engages the user in a conversation to find out what the user is looking for. And then that conversation itself is also embedded in that space, and services which are semantically closest in the description to what the user has been asking for are then retrieved. And prior to that, we do some classical filtering on hard attributes, of course, something like location, so that we only consider services that are in the location, that are offered also in the location where the user actually is. So it's a combination of classic filtering and sophisticated semantic search. And here you see an illustration of this high-dimensional semantic space, where, and it's a 3D point cloud, where each of these points represents a public service in Scotland that is offered in Scotland. And you see that they have different colors, and the colors mean basically clusters. So services that have similar colors are kind of similar to each other. And I'll zoom in a little bit to give you some idea. So, for example, down here there's a cluster, this red one, with crafts, sewing, and knitting groups. Then over there's one about outdoor exploration, social walks, local expertise, NHS pharmacy, advice, medicine, referral, and so on. You get the idea. There's this space represents these services, and proximity, like closeness, neighborhood, means that the services are similar. So now if I have a conversation with the user, I can basically represent that conversation as well as a dot in that space. And while I have the conversation, that dot kind of moves around in that space. And when I'm done with the conversation, I end up somewhere in this space. And then the neighborhood of this space should be some services that are quite relevant to what the user has been saying. So that's how it works. It's basically a neighborhood search in this space of semantic embeddings of these services. So that's quite technical and a little bit mathematical and all that. I hope it is kind of clear. Otherwise, feel free to ask questions or ask questions later. If not, I would move on to actually the FinTech use cases. Let's just move on.
There are no questions in the chat, so maybe you can also.
Sure. Okay, FinTech use cases. We have 6 different ones. You can see them all here. First one will be find the right financial product or service. Very similar to the case study that I just showed. Instead of searching public services in Scotland, you would be searching financial products or services of some FinTech company. The next one will be querying financial product or service descriptions. So instead of having to sift yourself through like pages and pages of product descriptions and PDFs and all that of what these products are in detail offering, you can just query these descriptions, just ask what you want to know about the product, and it's going to reply that. The next one will be automation of customer service. That's kind of self-explanatory. An online banking voice assistant, then fraud detection through behavioral security, and finally, know your customer. So customer analytics, sentiment, satisfaction, and these things. Okay, so let's start with the first one. As before, we import now a different assistant called Product Finder. We instantiate it, and then we start a chat with it. And it's going to introduce itself, say, hi, welcome to our FinTech company. How can I help you find the right financial product or service today? And just as I did with the presentation assistant, now I'm going to send a message to this product finder and say that I'm looking for an ETF with a focus on AI. And this is now ChatGPT working and saying, great choice, AI-focused ETFs have a lot of growth potential. Do you have any preference regarding risk level or expense ratio? And I'm gonna say, and by the way, of course, you notice that I'm just copying these things in, but things are not hard-coded here. I could be saying anything, and we can also try it out later on. This is a flexible, dynamic generation of a conversation. So I'm saying high risk, high reward is what I'm after. And it says, understood, here are 3 high risk, high reward AI focused ETFs for you to consider. And then it's listing 3 different ETFs with a short description of them and tells me, please let me know if you'd like more information on any of these options. And now I can say something like, the third one sounds interesting. And then it will actually tell me some more details about this one, AI Pioneers ETF, the third one. So you see the similarity to the product that I just showed with the Scottish government services, where, yeah, you would also get a suggestion of 3 services, but now it's actually financial products. But the principle is the same, and this can be applied to, of course, any kind of database of documents that you want to get recommendations from based on your input. Okay, that is the first use case already. Second use case, query financial products and service descriptions. We have a different assistant now, the Q&A assistant, and we instantiate it. And first we'll tell it to show us, to have something to work with, show us a product description of an ETF. And it just shows us more or less a random description of an ETF with the title, some short description, key features, investment strategy, risk and reward profile, expense ratio, and a conclusion. And this might be much longer in reality, this product description, many pages, and I might be too busy or too lazy or whatever to read through this and just want to know what's the investment strategy here. So I'll just ask that. And then it tells me the investment strategy is to track the investment results of an index composed of global equities in the robotics, AI, and automation industries, and so on. It's basically describing what is, sorry, no, I was just jumping. Describing what it finds here, and it's describing it in its own words and in a bit more extended version because I'm specifically asking for this. And of course, I might want to know where it took that information actually from, where in the document. And I can just ask it that. I can say, where in the description did you find this information? And it tells it, I found information in the investment strategy, in the investment strategy section of the product description, and then cites this section. So it is also able to prove where it took that information from. And that could, of course, be just verified with like classic software matching, seeing if that string is actually found in there. Okay, there was the Q&A assistant. As I said, asking for the investment strategy was just a random choice. I could have asked for anything else that can be found in this document. Use case number 3, automate customer service. Again, we have a different assistant, the customer service assistant. We instantiate it and start a chat with it. And it's introducing itself, says, hi, welcome to our online bank. How can I help you today? And I'll just say that I moved and leave it up to the customer service assistant to figure out what that means, what I want from it. I understand that you've moved. Would you like to update your address in our system? If so, please provide your new address, including street, city, state, and postal code. I'll do that. And provide this information. Didn't ask for the country. Thank you for providing your new address. To update it, I'll need to verify your identity. Please provide your full name and date of birth. So I'll do that. Thank you, John Doe. I've updated your address to this address that I just gave. To complete the process, you will receive a confirmation email. Please check your inbox, and so on. If you have any other questions or need further assistance, feel free to ask. So that was the example of a automation of customer service. And be aware that it has not been explicitly implemented that the user might want to change their address, or that when the user says that they moved, that then they should assume that they want to change the address or something. All that has been implemented is that there is 4 different categories of customer service cases, so to say, that it should detect from what the user is saying and then act accordingly. So change personal information, file a complaint, resolve technical issue, interest in product or other. And just by saying that I moved, it figured out that it must be this case, and it figured out what information it should probably ask for. So I could ask for anything that fits in any of these categories, and it would behave reasonably.
Alex, before you move, there's a question here. Is the information that ChatGPT uses up to date? So when was the last time the database was updated?
So in this case here, there's no information needed to be up to date. In the case of, also in this case, with the Q&A, it doesn't need access to the internet or to like up-to-date information, because what it gets is as an input is the product description, and its job is just to figure out where to find or to extract information from it.
Regarding the use case 2, it was a question.
Oh, use case 2. Okay, yeah. For that one, it doesn't need any updated basically real-time information. For this one, find the right financial product or service. The information would be sitting in a database of financial products and services, where the content of the database is represented like this up here in a point cloud or in a high-dimensional embedding space. And when you add a document to the document base or database, or if you remove a document, you would basically just update this and get a new dot here or remove a dot. So it would always be as up to date as you keep your database up to date. So in none of these use cases so far, it's actually needed basically updated world knowledge that goes beyond 2021 or anything, because that's what ChatGPT is trained on. It's trained on data that lasts until 2021, I think. And anything that you ask it about the world that has happened after that date, it cannot know, because it has never seen any training data on that. But it also doesn't need it for these cases. Okay, next up, online banking via voice assistant. So we import a new assistant called Online Banking Assistant. We instantiate it and start a chat with it. And it introduces itself, says, "Hi, welcome to our online banking service. How can I help you today?" And this time, we're not going to write a message, but we're actually going to send a voice message, which is perfectly possible as well. So I'll do that now. I want to make a bank transfer. And it does transcribe what I just said. You want to make a bank transfer. And it replies, "I understand that you'd like to make a bank transfer. Can you please provide me with the account details to which you'd like to transfer the money?" And I'll just say, sorry, following to my brother's account. Okay, it's also picked up the following, what I said before, but doesn't matter. I think it should still be fine. "Sure, I can help you with that. Please provide me with the amount you'd like to transfer and any reference you'd like to include with the transfer." And I'll say £100. Great, I'll transfer £100 to your brother's account. Is there any specific reference you'd like to include for this? And I'll say ice cream at the zoo. Perfect, I'll transfer £100 to your brother's account with the reference ice cream at the zoo. Please confirm if all the details are correct, and I'll proceed with the transfer. And I'll just give it some feedback and say, "Yes, thank you very much." "You're welcome. I have now initiated the transfer, blah, blah, blah. If you need any further assistance, feel free to ask. Have a great day." Of course, it did not transfer anything. It is just playing the role of a online banking assistant. But of course, it could be connected to an API now that then does the transfer.
There's a question here in the chat, like how does the ChatGPT knows banking details, your family information? How does it determine that it's your brother, etc.?
Yeah. Because I told it that it should assume that it has access to my banking details and knows my previous transactions. I told it to assume that and to behave as if it would know that. But in reality, you would, of course, integrate that would just be one part of the puzzle of a product. And you would integrate it with APIs that can fulfill these things. Like basically, if it would detect, you could make it detect by itself that you are referring to another transaction that you had before that you want to repeat, like the brother's account. And then you could connect the API and send an API request to the banking information or the transaction history to figure that out. And then, of course, in the end, if you want to make a transfer, you can tell basically ChatGPT, now rephrase what you just said in a sentence here, where it says, I'll transfer 100 pounds to your brother's account with the reference ice cream at the zoo. You could tell ChatGPT now, please now rephrase that in code that works with that API that receives a call to make the transfer. So you can actually let it translate that into an API call that then works.
Cool. There's another question. How do you prevent it from leaking information that it shall keep secret? For example, the bank account of user A told to user B.
Yeah. I would assume that the user has to be logged in to use this functionality. And then by logging in, basically the API that the chatbot can use would be limited or limited to just the user's details, of course. So that would be part of the system implementation, and that the API call only allows things that belong to the user and not to other users. So that's just normal security implementations. Really, the ChatGPT part is just the feature or the capability of having this smart, really flexible, versatile interface towards the user and also towards internal APIs. So you can basically translate between very codified API calls that are very clearly structured and formally between that space or that world and the world of users with natural language, and you can just make that connection basically without having to implement all these different flows of conversations that might occur.
Okay, there is one more question. Are you essentially saying that I don't need to write any code, just provide ChatGPT with my API specifications and then let it translate my voice commands into the code required to integrate with an API?
Yeah, basically that's what I'm saying. I mean, you would have to test and verify that it works always and not in just some cases and all that. But of course, the API would also have a error handling or something. So if there's an invalid request, you would be able to react to that. And what helps a lot usually is when you design the chatbot or when you design that instance of ChatGPT, or when you instruct it to do some things, that you give it examples. So you would just give it a couple of examples where you do something like this. You say, this is the input, just a natural language representation of this transaction, and then the corresponding API call, and then just tell it to please translate natural language sentences of transactions into an API call like this. And then you give a couple of examples, and then it should be able to do that. If not, there's still there's another feature that OpenAI has released, which is the plugins that are exactly doing that. So that's companies that are selected by OpenAI that are allowed to build exactly such an interface of ChatGPT and their own API. So, for example, Wolfram Alpha is one of the companies that provides a plugin like that. So you can basically ask any kind of math questions or sciencey questions, and it's going to detect, okay, this is the sciencey questions. I'm going to use the Wolfram Alpha plugin. I'm going to translate that into the API of Wolfram Alpha, and I'm going to send it to Wolfram Alpha, get a response, and then I will retranslate that kind of sciencey response or like formal response into natural language text for the user again.
Nice. There's one other question. How about preventing it from generating meaningless or unrelated answers? For example, answering a question not related to banking at all.
Yeah. I mean, you only need to tackle that problem if it actually is a problem. So I think by now it's usually good enough to always come up with relevant answers. It's usually not just giving any irrelevant answer. But if it does, I mean, you could build just like another instance of ChatGPT that you call, I don't know, sanity detector or a sanity checker or something, that you just feed in the answer or the conversation with the user and the chatbot, and let it judge whether the chatbot is doing well, whether the assistant is actually behaving well and giving relevant answers. So you could have like a version or an instance of ChatGPT that just judges that, and you can work in that way in many cases. So for many very specific problems that you have, you can just build like a specific create a very specific assistant that takes care of exactly that thing, and then combine all these different assistants together to build a great product.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to the next use case, which is fraud detection through behavioral security. And in this one, we'll just have a new banking assistant, just a new session basically, and start a chat. And this time we will act as a malicious actor, basically that is not that has no good intentions and has actually kind of hacked the bank account or something like that. That's the scenario. So instead of making sending a long message or something, I'll just be very brief and say, send money. It says, of course, I can help you with that. To which account would you like to send money? So it's basically doing just behaving as it behaved before. That's fine. I'll just provide a bank account number that is abroad. And I'll provide a amount that is rather huge and also in a different currency than before. Before it was pounds, now it's dollars. And it's taking all that in. Great, you'd like to transfer that account, that money to that account. Is there a specific reference or message you would like to include? And I'll be a bit impolite and just say, just do it. All right, I'll proceed with the transfer of $10,000 to account that without any specific reference. Please confirm if all details are correct. And yeah, I'll not confirm that anymore. That's fine. But what I would hope now is that this fraud detector that we're using here, which is just another instance of ChatGPT with the different instructions and different tuning, so to say, and feed it, basically tell it to decide whether this transaction now or this conversation seems to be done by a fraudulent person, or whether this is a fraudulent conversation or not. So we say detect fraud, give it the conversation that we just had now, and as a reference, give it the conversation that we had before with the brother's account and the ice cream in the zoo and all that. And then see what it says. And it says, it is difficult to determine with certainty if this conversation is a fraud or not. However, there are some red flags that could indicate potential fraud, such as the large amount of money being transferred and the user's urgency with the phrase, just do it. It would be advisable for the banking assistant to ask for additional verification or information before proceeding with the transfer. And so it kind of worked, assuming that this really is fraud. Of course, it might just be fine, but maybe asking for additional verification is a good idea. And be aware that it only had one reference conversation. So it only had that conversation before with the, I'm not going to scroll up, that's just too confusing. It only had this one reference conversation that we had with the 100 pounds to the brother's account for the ice cream at the zoo. And just because that conversation was a bit more friendly, it was different, a different currency and all that, it is kind of suspecting that this might be a fraud now. But if we have a whole range of conversations, like hundreds of conversations, because everybody has done hundreds of transactions, you can much better judge whether one single conversation is kind of an outlier on an anomaly, and identify potential frauds. And of course, this can be applied to other things as well, to emails, to phone calls. If they get transcribed automatically, you can detect if there's a suspicious if there's suspicious things going on. Okay, there was that use case, and now the final use case: know your customer, KYC. We import the KYC analyzer and instantiate it, and now we just tell it to extract sentiment, satisfaction, and persona of the user based on the conversation from above, the nice one with the brother and the £100 and the ice cream in the zoo. So I'll do that. And it says sentiment: the customer sentiment in this conversation is positive and satisfied. They were able to successfully complete the desired task with the help of the assistant. Satisfaction: the customer is satisfied with the service provided by the assistant, as they are able to make the bank transfer without any issues. Personality sketch: the customer appears to be straightforward and concise in their communication. They provide the necessary information without any unnecessary elaboration. They also seem to have a sense of humor, as evidenced by the playful reference they chose for the bank transfer, the ice cream at the zoo. Overall, the customer seems to be cooperative and appreciative of the assistance provided. So that use case basically just shows that conversations or customer interactions can be evaluated automatically. Sentiment, satisfaction can be extracted. And again, this is just one conversation. If you had hundreds of conversations or just dozens of conversations, you could much better sketch the personality automatically and build basically a persona for each single customer. And it might be not super useful from a programmer's point of perspective, because it's kind of like natural language text, and it's how do you get something extracted from this that you can put in a database then, and then make some analytics, automatically aggregate things about it. But there's no problem, because you can just tell ChatGPT to bring that in a different format that is kind of like a standardized, almost like an evaluation sheet or something, where you could judge all these things and then put that in a database. Okay, that is basically it. That's the 6 different use cases, prototypes that I wanted to show, and the case study I showed before. And here's just a section about where to learn more about the plugins that I've been talking about. There's an open source project called LangChain, which is especially about the combination of multiple different instances of ChatGPT models that work together to build something bigger or better. Then Azure is interesting, because Azure has exclusively licensed these models. So Azure is the only other company that can run these models on their own infrastructure, apart from OpenAI. And Azure, of course, comes with all the enterprise level security, data privacy, and all that. So none of the data that you put in actually leaves Europe, if you want, or is accessed by anybody else than yourself. And then Bing Chat is also quite interesting, where also Microsoft again included or incorporated basically ChatGPT in their Bing search, where they are combining classical web search with the capabilities of this ChatGPT interface, where it's also able to then reference the sources. If it tells you anything, it can tell you where it got it from. All right, so we have officially
Amazing.
finished, and you're welcome to ask questions now.
Yes. While people is thinking of questions, maybe shall we launch the 2 questions that we thought that we would like to learn from them through the poll, Alex?
Oh,
so
yeah, sure.
Yeah. So you're gonna see on screen a poll with 2 questions that we would like you to please answer to us. We want to know your thoughts about it, and also know what would you expect for our next webinar. Thank you for taking the time to answer this. First question: do you see ChatGPT being used in FinTech after this webinar? Maybe a little bit more. And then what would you like to learn more about? Whether it's alternatives to ChatGPT, risks and limitations of ChatGPT, or if you have some other idea, maybe you can leave it in the chat. Most people has answered. Just gonna give it just more seconds. Okay. Because everyone answered. Okay, I'm gonna give it 10 more seconds, just in case someone else is answering. Cool. So ending the poll now. So Alex, you should know that 64% of people is saying that yes, they see ChatGPT being used in fintech, and 36 of them thinks that maybe, depending on the risks and limitations management. 77% of people would like to learn more about risks and limitations within ChatGPT. Alternatives to ChatGPT, some people, 18%. And then there's actually one request, someone who said others, and then put in the question. He or she said, I would like to see the actual API calls and implementation details. I don't know if you have any comments to this.
Well, I can give a little sneak into some details.
Nice.
For example, the customer service. You see, this is the instruction that I gave to it. Act as a customer service assistant for an online bank that is able to identify the intent of the customer, in parentheses user, as belonging to one of the following categories: change personal information, file complaints, resolve technical issue, interest in product or other. Once the intent has been identified, gently nudge the customer to provide you with the information relevant to fulfill the request. Here's an example. Then I give it an example of a conversation where somebody says that they want to change their phone number. From now on, I will be the customer and you the customer service assistant, and we will start a new session. Start with welcoming me. And that's basically it. Apart from that, it is this is the call to OpenAI, and it puts in messages. Messages are collected as user input from the user, and assistants response like this. So messages are just these little dicts. And then there's some glue logic around it. And all these different bots have been built in similar ways. So they've been instructed accordingly to, for example, the fraud detection maybe is interesting. Based on the following record of a conversation between a customer and a banking assistant, then here will be inserted the good conversation, decide if the following conversation is likely a fraud or not, and then the bad conversation comes. And that's all that it was told to do. And then it does it. Any more questions?
No, there aren't any more questions so far. You should know that this recording session will be available through our YouTube channel as well in around 24 hours or 48 at the most. So this is also going to be available for everyone else to watch if they want. I believe we can close this session because there are no further questions. Do you agree, Alex?
Yeah, I agree. I have one question to listeners. Do you have any kind of other use cases in mind that you have not seen right here? So if you have any, please just drop them in the chat. Would be interesting to hear about them, think about them, or try them out.
Nice. Meanwhile, there's one comment a comment from someone says, I tried something very similar, but ChatGPT sometimes insists on adding long explanations to the answer instead of returning what I asked for. For example, I tell it to just return a JSON because that is the only thing it can process, but it returns text with the JSON somewhere in it. How can I prevent this?
Yeah, basically by just telling it what you don't want or what it should do. So tell it explicitly, only return the JSON, don't return text or something like that. And then also give it an example or a couple of examples where you ask for something and then you only provide the JSON and then another question and you only provide the JSON so that it understands really this is the pattern that it should show. For example, what you should do, like as we said in the beginning, it's always it was trained on completing sentences, basically predicting what comes next. So what you do is you say what you want, you give it an example, and there already is this pattern in assistant user. It's just a back and forth question answering thing, and then you say, okay, now behave as described above, and then you just prompt it with this. You add this assistant colon because now it would recognize again the pattern. Okay, now it's my turn to actually do something. So if you wanted to have that with the JSON thing, you could do something like just write it here. Something like convert the following sentence into a JSON or something. Convert the given sentence into a JSON or something like that. Example, sentence, and then JSON. And then you do again sentence and JSON. And then in the end, you say, now do as you were told or something like that. Of course, not exactly like that, but then now you just say JSON or sentence, and here you put in your input sentence, and then this will be the end of the instruction, and then it will produce that. Here you would fill with examples, but here you would actually insert that JSON, that sentence that you want, and then you would here get the JSON that you want. I would expect you just need to take some time and formulate that well so that it is quite clear what it should do, and just tweak these instructions. And really, examples help a lot.
Thank you for the answer. Regarding your question, Alex, about other use cases, someone is asking about maybe back office work use case. There's much to do regarding AI to be used in the helping back office at FinTech. Can you see this as a benefit? Can it be used?
Yeah, I would assume so. Very much. What kind of back office tasks are you thinking about?
Let's see if there is an answer to your question. I don't see it yet. Maybe the person had to go. I don't know, but just no answer.
But yeah, I see a lot of potential of automation in basically all areas, like many areas at least. And I mean, the purpose of these of showing these use cases is maybe not so much the individual specific use case. So don't focus too much on whether this makes a lot of sense or not. Some make more sense than others. But the basic message is in the end that there's plenty, like there's plentiful use cases. There's a lot of use cases and a lot of opportunities to use ChatGPT to speed things up, to improve quality, to improve response times, to automate things, to save costs, to build new amazing features, like stunning features that really have a wow effect. And it's just basically about coming up with the problems, or like bringing the problems, and then you can you can in many cases use these large language models to solve many issues. One thing I also tried, by the way, that I didn't show here is to automatically classify bank transactions. Like in your transaction history, you have a lot of sometimes cryptic entries of where your money is going, basically. And sometimes there's a lot of banking apps that already offer these kind of automatic classification into, like, this is shopping, this is food, this is transport, or traveling, or I don't know, entertainment. And these kind of classifications, I know there's like whole companies just focusing on only this for years already. And you can quickly build a prototype. I did that in preparation for this talk, but I didn't show it here. That just classifies these transactions and just automatically puts a label of a set of labels that you define on these transactions, and lets you do basically these analytics and this kind of bucketing of this categorization of transactions. It's just another use case that that you can quickly come up with, and there's a lot. So
Yeah,
it's just there's more use cases than you think, and just try to abstract away from all these things that you've seen now, and try to think about, okay, if it can all do all these different kind of diverse tasks, what else can it do that is relevant for my case?
Perfect. Yeah. He answered the person asking the question about back office, and says, back office in general, I see too much focus in interaction with external clients, but less on internal clients. Cool. Thank you so much for your time, for everything you taught us. And we hope to see you again in a next webinar.
Yep. Thank you all for listening. Hope it was interesting.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.